In Port Charles, reconciliation was supposed to be the beginning of healing, but for some, it only opened deeper wounds. Nina had spent countless sleepless nights trying to chart a path back to her daughter, haunted by guilt, overwhelmed by regret, and desperate to undo the damage she had done. Her past mistakes loomed large, especially the betrayal that cost her any hope of a peaceful bond with Willow. Though she approached with a softened demeanor and trembling voice, Willow met her mother's outreach with a quiet but resolute rejection. The pain in Nina's eyes was unmistakable, but Willow's boundaries were unshakable. This was not a moment for forgiveness, it was a reckoning. But Nina, ever determined, pivoted. If she couldn't be close to Willow emotionally, she would at least protect her legally. She turned to Rick, a sharp-witted attorney with a complicated past of his own, and implored him to represent Willow in the custody proceedings that had begun to consume her life. Nina knew the lines of battle were being drawn, and while she couldn't erase the scars she had left on Willow's heart, she hoped to shield her daughter from further harm in court. Rick hesitated, uncertain whether aligning with Nina would help or hurt Willow, but the desperation in her plea was enough to push him toward a quiet investigation. Meanwhile, Drew was spiraling. The walls of trust around him were crumbling faster than he could reinforce them, and Michael's firm stance had become an impenetrable barrier. Drew knew how much Willow was suffering, cut off from her children, cast out of the family she once called her own, treated more like a criminal than a mother. Though she had made her share of missteps, he believed she deserved grace. He approached Michael not as an adversary, but as a man pleading for empathy, asking him to allow Willow visitation with the children, just a moment, just a weekend, anything. But Michael, still bitter over the events that had fractured their family, remained unmoved. Drew left with a sinking heart, knowing he had failed her again. Curtis, still recovering from his own recent tragedies and betrayals, found himself in the uncomfortable position of middleman. Trina, already burdened by her mother's silence and Curtis's long-guarded secrets, sat across from him as he shared Drew's latest struggles. He told her about the custody fight, about the way the Corinthos family had begun to ice out anyone who didn't walk in lockstep with their code of loyalty. Trina listened, her eyes flickering with emotion, caught between compassion for Drew and resentment for the lies that had saturated her own family's history. At the same time, Portia was navigating a quiet implosion of her career. The hospital corridors that had once given her purpose now felt like cages. The pressure, the politics, the whispered judgments about her personal life, all of it had become too much. She drafted her resignation letter in silence, knowing the fallout would be profound. But her decision wasn't just about escape, it was an act of self-preservation. She had sacrificed too much for a system that gave her too little in return. Unbeknownst to Drew, secrets were beginning to surface that would soon alter the direction of his battle. Elizabeth, long tormented by her role in various cover-ups and betrayals, made a quiet confession. She told Drew, carefully and with no small amount of shame, that it was Curtis who had exposed the truth about Willow's affair to Michael. The revelation hit Drew like a tidal wave, not because he hadn't expected betrayal, but because it had come from someone so close. Someone he trusted. Someone he once considered a friend. The blow shattered whatever illusions Drew had left about loyalty in Port Charles. Now he understood, even among allies, agendas ran deep. And in the wake of these unraveling allegiances, a familiar but fractured connection tried to repair itself. Kai had returned to Trina's world like a shadow she had nearly forgotten, someone who had once held her attention but had fallen from grace. Kai, sincere and self-aware in a way he hadn't been before, approached her not with smooth words but with honesty. He admitted to his past mistakes, to the pride that had pushed her away, and asked for another chance. But Trina, still recovering from layers of deception and hurt, could not bring herself to reopen the door. She had outgrown the fantasy of what Kai used to be. She turned him down, not out of bitterness, but because she finally understood her worth. And Kai, though crushed, accepted her choice. Through these individual heartbreaks and reckonings, a quiet storm brewed over Port Charles. Nina, left without her daughter's forgiveness, watched as Rick began to draw up legal strategies to bolster Willow's chances in court. Drew, disillusioned and betrayed, began to see that justice would not come from playing fair. Portia, now adrift, contemplated what her life might become outside the hospital. Curtis, exposed and perhaps unaware of how deeply his betrayal had cut, tried to maintain the appearance of integrity. Trina, weary but wiser, stood her ground as the men around her shifted like sand. And Willow, still aching from Drew's affair and Michael's coldness, remained the center of a battle that showed no signs of resolution. Yet beneath the pain and silence, small choices were being made, decisions that would change everything. Willow, though furious with Drew, quietly met with Rick. She didn't thank Nina. She didn't offer a truce. But she was ready to fight, and she needed a lawyer who understood the enemy. Rick's allegiance, still questionable, now had a new purpose. Drew, shaken by Elizabeth's confession, reached out to Sonny, not to negotiate, but to warn him. He believed the Corinthos family's grip on Michael was tightening, and if they weren't careful, the children would become pawns in a war they couldn't control. Sonny listened, but his silence spoke volumes. As for Curtis, he sensed that something had shifted between him and Drew, but he wasn't yet aware that Elizabeth had been the one to tip the scales. Trina's increasing distance only added to his unease. The family he had tried so hard to build was beginning to crumble again, and no amount of damage control would stop it if the truth spread further. Portia, freshly unmoored from her hospital role, began to reach for something new. An advocacy project, perhaps, to help women navigating abuse and institutional neglect. Her resignation, while painful, opened space for reinvention. And as she stepped into this new phase, she found herself intersecting once again with Nina, who sought her advice on how to reach Willow through non-legal channels. The two women, neither friends nor enemies, shared a rare moment of mutual understanding. They had both hurt their daughters. They had both been shut out. But they weren't finished. In the end, the custody battle was never just about the children. It was about control. About forgiveness. About the things left unsaid and the people left behind. As Nina watched from afar while Rick and Willow prepared their legal defense, she understood that no matter how many court victories she could win, none of them would guarantee her a place in Willow's heart. Drew, now hardened by betrayal, prepared to expose Curtis if it meant saving Willow from Michael's wrath. And Trina, aware of the quiet storm building around her family, finally felt clarity in her decision to walk alone, stronger, clearer, and without regret. Port Charles had seen wars before, romantic wars, business wars, criminal wars, but this was something different. This was a war of loyalties, of hidden truths, of families torn between principle and love. And as the lines deepened, every player had a choice: stay loyal or stay free. But no one could do both. Not anymore.